Hi guys. So it's just me right now. I'm waiting for Roya to jump in. I'm sure she'll be here any second. I'm just trying to get all my windows set up so I can see everything. I have notes, and then I also have the chat pulled up, trying to fit everything on my screen. Hello. Ugh, I'm going to butcher your name. I'm really sorry. Vername? Is that your name? Vername? Hello. Okay, Roya said she's going to be another second. She's having some internet issues, but she's working on it. So while we're waiting, if you guys want to, you can type into the chat any like overall thoughts you had about the book, and then I can like read it out loud and say what I think about that. Talk about any questions you have or favorite scenes, favorite characters.
Hey.
Hey, there you are.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. My internet was just not working like at all for some reason. That was
Yeah.
really odd.
Yeah, sometimes that happens.
Yeah, I was getting a little bit worried, but then it started working again. I was like downloading the app on my phone and trying to figure out if I would have to do it that way, but thankfully it did not come to that.
Yeah, I'm glad it ended up working. Technology sometimes doesn't cooperate.
Yep. Definitely makes sense.
Cool. All right. Well, we've got 4 people watching, although I have it open as well, so I'm probably one of those 4 people. So we probably have 3 people watching. I guess we'll just start with like overall thoughts for the book. I mean, I can give my thoughts, but they're kind of biased because I've watched them or I've read these books so many times. But I really love the second book. There are a lot of things that are introduced and like plot lines and stuff that happen, especially at the end. There are some reveals and stuff that I think are really cool and exciting. And I love this book and I gave it 5 stars. But like I said, I'm just totally biased.
Yeah, I think I really liked it a lot because I mean the plot does develop a lot more and there were a lot of really high stakes things going on as well. So it was pretty crazy. I did notice quite a few parallels to like the Sword of Truth series because I know we were talking about that series like last time, and
Mm-hmm.
because in the second book of that, there's also a like this whole thing about collars on people with magic to control their magic or something, and it feels very similar to that for some reason. It's really odd.
Yeah. Actually, so part of the collar stuff in that Sort of Truth series starts at the end of the first book. And when I was reading that, I was like, this is really similar. And apparently, like I did a little bit of research into it, and apparently Robert Jordan like was very aware of these similarities, but had been told by his lawyers like that he shouldn't talk about it. And so he's been on record to say that like I'm not allowed to talk about it. But I think that there are other people who also saw a lot of similarities, and I think it's probably more than just the collars, but I don't really know. But
Well,
yeah,
because also
I
the
think
Sword
it's
of
like a
Truth
known
series
thing.
has like the Mord Sith and stuff too, and that also feels very similar to those same people.
Sort of, but well, I just finished reading the first book, like the Sort of Truth first book last month, and that series has like to me a much more sexual spin on things
It
than
really
this series
does.
does.
Wait till you get to the third and fourth ones.
I
Oh,
mean, that's what I hear. I'm prepared for some extreme weirdness. I don't know if I'll make it all the way through the series because people, I don't know, there's mixed opinions out there on like if it's actually any good or not. But I'm just gonna go as long as I can. But I am totally prepared for the fourth book to be really, really weird.
yeah, just be prepared for like stuff that you wonder if it was even there on purpose. Because like seriously, I kept thinking, is he writing like some erotica and stuff and just putting it in the wrong book by accident? Like that was
Yeah. Yeah.
but I don't even know. But yeah.
So someone in the chat said, even though it was the second book, I still kind of hope that Rand wouldn't be the Dragon Reborn in my first read through. He somehow didn't appeal to me all that much. So I totally get that. Rand is definitely not like my favorite character at all. Some of the other side characters outshine him for me, for sure. But I don't think I had any doubt during the second book, even on my first reread, but it's so hard to know that he was going to end up being the Dragon Reborn. I felt like everything was pointing in that direction.
Yeah, I think that there's sort of very little room for anyone else to be instead or anything like that.
Yeah.
Kind of, because I mean, it does make it very obvious, but then I can totally see like, thinking, well, what if the book just does a complete like 180 and does,
yeah.
It's Egwene instead.
Right? Yeah.
Completely random like that, where you're like, that makes no sense. Nothing was pointing to that. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see like wanting it to be somebody else, but it wasn't a surprise. I don't think it was a surprise to anybody. That's how it ended up happening. Did anybody in who's watching or Roya, do you guys have any like questions about stuff that happened that you weren't like sure you totally got everything that happened?
Well, one thing I thought was kind of funny, I should grab my my copy really quick because there's a bunch of weird like stuff on the back of the cover that I can't figure out what it's supposed to be. So this is kind of funny.
You'll have to show me because I don't have those covers anymore.
Okay, so what I thought was funny is okay. So up here we have something that looks like it's probably a Trolloc because it's got horns and all this other stuff.
Yes.
And then we turn around and there are just these people wearing horned helmets on the back.
Oh.
They're very much human looking. Like it's obvious they're just people wearing armor that has horns on the helmets.
I wonder if that's supposed to be the Shan-Chan. Do they have, I mean, I know they had like weird armor, but I don't remember if they were wearing helmets with horns. I think they might have been. I think that maybe that's what it is.
Maybe, because they all look like they're just dudes too. They're just guys. Like there are no women or anything. And I'm just like sitting here going like, okay, like who are these random people?
I mean, maybe they're dark friends. Who knows?
Like I had no idea. I was seriously like, I kept looking at the back of the book and being like, what? I have no idea.
Yeah, yeah. My guess is that it's the Sean Chan, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I have no idea. There's a phone ringing on my end. I'm gonna have to ignore it.
Like your Google Hangouts is calling you, or like your actual phone is ringing?
No, it's my actual phone.
Oh, okay. That's funny. Do you have any favorite scenes or favorite characters from this book?
Well, I thought
characters you were surprised to see again, maybe?
Well, I think that like Nynaeve had a more prominent role in this one. And I thought that like a lot of the stuff that she did throughout the story just was really badass and really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
There's like that crazy part where she goes to that funky alternate reality where she's a queen and she's married to Lan and they have children and all this other stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
The longer she's there, the more she actually remembers that that life, that alternate life.
Yeah, and she's not supposed to be able to remember that. So that's during her like accepted test, and the way that those like her angry all are supposed to work is that you're not supposed to remember anything. So that's kind of like an anomaly that she was able to remember stuff.
Yeah, it's super weird. It kind of made me think of have you seen Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so
which is like a crime for like my age generation, but I haven't.
There's this one episode of that where she wakes up in an insane asylum and it's like, oh, you just think that you're the Slayer and you're killing vampires, but really you're in this insane asylum and all this stuff. And it's like pretty much implied that that's not the reality. The insane asylum is not real. Yeah. And it's like messing with her head. But by the end of the episode, you kind of go, like, it leaves you kind of with the way that it ends and everything, it leaves you kind of thinking, what if that was the reality? And like the actual premise of the show is all in her head and it's not the reality. And it's just a random episode in like the last couple seasons or something. And this whole thing with Nynaeve going into that alternate reality, and then like the longer she's there, the more she's like actually remembering that as her reality and everything. It reminded me of that automatically. And it was like, what if that was actually real and the whole story was like not? And that'd be really weird. I have no idea.
That's funny. Yeah, so the alternate reality stuff, I mean, that comes up a few times. Like there's the different lives that Nynaeve sees in her test or whatever, but there's also when Rand uses the portal stone like later in the book where they go through all those different lives, like everybody got to see different lives, which I thought was really cool. And it kind of, what I like about it is like usually alternate realities and stuff is more of a science fiction thing, but he's totally pulled it into this world, which is super fantasy, but still kind of put like a magical spin on having alternate realities, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I think that like there are a few things that seem a little bit science fiction-y about this story. And I think that kind of happens between sci-fi and fantasy where, I mean, some people think of them as complete opposites, but really they're not in a way, because quite often they are both in some weird way. And the same authors will write both and whatever, and bookstores will often have both in the same section.
Yeah, put together.
Yeah, and so sometimes like it never really surprises me anymore when like a sci-fi element is thrown into fantasy or something, because I mean, even right at the beginning of this series, like the first scene, the prologue and everything seems a bit more sci-fi-y in a way. And so yeah, and so the fact that there are things like that, it makes sense.
Yeah. I actually was doing some like research to prepare for this live show, and I ran across someone who made a comparison of the one power in this series as being similar to the Force in Star Wars, and I thought that was really interesting because I hadn't thought about it that way before.
I totally hadn't either.
But it kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah, kind of does.
Let's see. So, I kind of just wrote down like different plot points that happened that might be like interesting to talk about. So the first one was when in the very beginning, these are sort of in chronological order. When Egwene like goes to visit Padan Fane, and that was like the stupidest thing to do. Like I
That seems
couldn't
like kind of a bad
believe
idea.
that she is totally a bad idea. And obviously, after seeing how it played out, we know it was a bad idea. I think Nynaeve was, or Egwene was just being really naive, and she only remembers Padan Fane as like this guy who visited where she lived like once a year, and he was always like fun, and so I think she just like was under anticipating how evil he had become, but that was like the stupidest thing to do.
Yeah, because I think that, I mean, yeah, it's true. Like, she knew him and everything, and totally not in that context. So I think that, I mean, it makes sense. But it does seem like that seems like a bad idea.
And I mean, she's really lucky that she survived and just got knocked out, which I guess is a little bit on the convenient side because she's a main character. She could have very easily died.
That's true.
And then
Probably
so
would.
I find this Shinier culture like really interesting. Some people on the discussion boards have mentioned like how they're very warlike and possibly like inspired by Japanese or samurai culture, which I could totally see, especially with, I mean, the whole top knot thing, which when I was first reading the book, I had to like look up what that was, but it's basically just like a ponytail on top of their head. I think they like shave the bottom of their head and then it's just the top that has hair and they put it in a ponytail. Hopefully I'm not making that up, but I swear I looked that up and that's what it was.
That's what I remember. I'm remembering, yeah.
Yeah. That seems a little on the Japanese, like it reminds me a little bit of Japanese style samurai hair. So I can see that. Were you surprised by Moraine's relationship with Swan, the Amerlin?
Not really. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah.
Were there hints to that before? I don't remember.
I don't remember either. I don't think so.
Yeah, I think that was the first time that they like showed them. I think the first time I read it, I was like, "Whoa, she knows this person, like they're friends." And I thought it was cool that they were trying to keep the like how close they were so under wraps so that no one would know that they were working together. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Mm, it's my phone again. It's my husband. I'm just gonna text him and be like, dude, I can't answer unless you want to be live on the internet.
I think you can mute yourself if you need to, but
Mm,
yes, someone in the chat said that's so Egwene, just always trying to connect people, and that's true. That's how she is throughout the whole series. I think she's just soft-hearted and a little on the naive side, like wanting to trust people. Although she as the series goes on, she progresses as a character and is probably not as naive like later in the series, but in the beginning, definitely, she just wants everybody to be friends. I feel like. And then the next plot point I have is like Matt's healing scenes. I think that was like the first time I had seen a bunch of Aes Sedai working together with the power, and I remember thinking that like that was a really cool scene to see how they were like healing him and forming that circle and like joining together. Like that was really interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that it was just really interesting overall to see more Aes Sedai in this book than in the first one.
Yeah, there are a lot more, and you learn a lot more about like their culture and how they're set up and stuff, like the different I'm forgetting the word, the different like groups, the Ajas, the different Ajas that they're in or whatever, and how they stand for different things, which I think is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and how they're named after colors.
yeah, yeah. If I was to pick an Aja like for myself, I think I would be a blue.
Hmm.
Do you know what you would be?
I have no idea.
Well, the next book when you're reading it, think about it.
Think
We'll talk about it next time. But
Mhm.
I totally think I would be either blue or I might be white because white is like very logical and I could totally see myself being, I mean, I am a pretty logical person. But they try to like make decisions based on just logic and like take emotion out of the equation, which I don't think that I do necessarily, but that I think is like cool. Like I think I wish I could do that. um and then there was the scenes where Rand like was running away and the other characters were like following after him and seeing his effect on all the little towns that he visited. That was really cool because I before that point I hadn't really realized how taveren can really affect the people around them. And obviously Rand is a super strong taveren and it's not like normal, but to see the different effects that he had on those towns and like how they were both positive and negative, it was just like random things that were happening, I thought was really cool. I don't think I've ever run across another series that has like the idea of a taveren in it, like a character that, or I mean, I'm sure that the idea exists, but they probably don't put a name to it or anything. So I think that whole idea of like a taveren and how it works, like how they're fated to do something and they affect the lives of the people around them. I think that is like a really cool concept from this series.
Mhm. I think so too. I don't think I've come across that either that I can think of.
Yeah. And then so that's when Rand accidentally uses the portal stone in his sleep and then takes um, the two people that are with him, Huron and some Shinar guy. I don't remember. And that kind of surprised me because I wouldn't have thought that Rand could use the portal stone in his sleep because it seemed so difficult for him to use it in the past. So I was like, what? You did this on accident while you were sleeping? But the world that he takes them to, I thought was really interesting. Oh, yes, Huron. Thank you.
Yeah, it might be because he's like it's like he already did it before, so then it's easier or something, but it does
Yeah.
seem very weird.
Or like maybe in his sleep, using the power is a little more natural because he does not like thinking about it as hard. I don't know. That was kind of surprising. But I thought the world that he took them to was interesting. And we see I forget what they're called. The Golem, not Gollum, but something like that. Golem, those like monsters or whatever, and you don't know what those are until you get to the end of the book where you like are fighting against the Shan-Chan. Right? They have those at the end of the book, right?
I think so.
Yeah, I think they're part of the big battle. So I think that's interesting because then it gives you a clue as to what happened in that alternate world. Has something to do with the Shan-Chan.
Mm.
At least I think. I mean, I don't think it's ever really clarified. Like, you don't go back to that world.
Oh, that's a bummer.
At least not that I know of. So I haven't read all of the books and I don't remember every single detail, but I don't think we go back there. Um, Perrin is growing into his wolf abilities in this book, which I think are cool. I love that he was trying to make it seem like he was a sniffer, like the same thing that Huron is, um, because he didn't want people to know that it had to do with wolves, but he was just using the wolves. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, and I started reading the third book already, and like yeah, some of that is still pretty prevalent in the beginning of the third book.
Yeah, yeah. He is my favorite character. I love his like wolf stuff. I think it's so cool. Someone in the chat asked, why does Rand not suspect Selene as evil? And I think that's just because Rand is dumb. And I think that he and other characters can't necessarily think clearly when she's around.
I think also just like who's evil and who's not throughout the book is somewhat like no one really knows in a way. Even if it's when it's obvious to the reader, it's like not obvious to any of the people pretty much.
Yeah. I think that in general the characters are pretty clueless about that kind of stuff. But I mean, there's definitely like reveals throughout the series that you're like, whoa, that person was evil. Like in this one, at the very end, Ingtar, he confesses that he's been a dark friend the whole time, and that he was the one that like let in all the Trollocs and stuff into what was the city? Valdara at the beginning of the book. Like that was all his fault. And that totally surprised me when I read it the first time. I was like, what? And I think even like the second time I read it, I had like forgotten that he was the bad guy. So there's definitely lots of different things like that happen throughout the whole series, that like people that you didn't think were evil are evil. People that you might have thought were evil turn out to be good. Like it's all over the place.
Yeah, it'd be kind of weird if Selene turned out to be good.
Yeah, it would totally be weird. Someone in the chat said it's a little bit weird having the concept of circular history and parallel worlds in the same book, in my opinion. Yeah, I guess that's true. I hadn't really thought about that, because if you have parallel universes, you wouldn't really think that things are circular, but maybe within each of those parallel worlds, their history is circular. I don't know. Someone said Rand is completely blind concerning everything involving pretty ladies.
I was totally thinking that too.
Yeah. I mean, all three of the guys.
I think pretty much everyone in the story tends to trust a woman more and everything, and no one ever seems to suspect that a woman is a bad guy at any point. It's like weird.
Yeah.
So I was totally thinking that. It makes perfect sense.
I'm getting an echo on myself. I don't know how to fix it. Oh well. We already talked about Nynaeve.
You get on that black cat, it is red.
And then, I was so happy when he showed up. Like, I remember the very first time I read this series, like, I wasn't expecting him to show up again. I thought he was really dead. And I was so happy to see him.
Who? Tom. Yeah, that's what I thought you said, but your voice got really quiet all of a sudden when you said his name, and I was like, who? But no, I totally called that, because the way that he died and everything was exactly like Gandalf, where like he's like he dies protecting everyone else so that they can run away and everything. And I totally was thinking this is just like Gandalf, and he's already sort of the Gandalf character. So I totally had a feeling he would show up like perfectly okay later on. So it didn't surprise me at all. I was like, oh, awesome.
I think you mentioned that in the last live show, and like I couldn't say anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, because I was totally like thinking it too, and I couldn't say anything either, because at that point I had gotten that far in the second book already. Like, but yeah, I totally had a feeling he was still alive, and I was really glad that he was, because it would have been too sad if he wasn't.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite characters too. I mean, he is kind of like, but he doesn't know anything about magic, so that's different.
Yeah, but it's like basically the type of character that he is and everything, like personality-wise, sort of, and just how much more he's like been around the block than the other characters. Like he knows more than them and everything. Like he's totally, the Gandalf character in a way.
Yeah.
I thought that because the entire first book was so reminiscent of Lord of the Rings to me that I totally like there's just plot-wise, so many things happened the same way that I was like, he's gonna show up later anyway. Even though he died, he's not really gonna be dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So someone in the chat asked if we think the series is accessible or easily understandable for fantasy newbies. So I know what I think. What do you think?
What do you think?
I think that it would probably not be super, I mean, it really depends. Because, I mean, if you read some really dense stuff that isn't fantasy, then it could be. But, and also there really aren't a whole ton of fantasy terms or anything. Because if you, like, some books you run into that they have a lot of fantasy terms that someone who's never read a fantasy book before would have no clue what they are and everything. And so, you know, stuff like a lot of people don't even know what necromancy is or what scrying is or like anything pretty much. So then a book that has a ton of stuff like that in it would be super confusing if someone hasn't come across a lot of fantasy books before. So in that way, I don't think that these books have that much of that in it. Like it's not really full of fantasy terms that you would have to know before going in. But on the other hand, it is very dense and it does have a lot of characters even for a fantasy book, because fantasy does like tend to have a ton of characters. And I know that people tend to think, wow, this has a lot of characters if they haven't read a fantasy book before. And I gave like one of my own books to my mom to read once. It was like in first draft form way back when. And my mom read it and she said, you have a lot of like way too many characters. It's really hard to follow. And I didn't think it was hard to follow in the least. I thought it was, you know, a perfectly normal amount of characters. But basically, the point being, if you haven't read a lot of fantasy, this series does have a ton of characters, like more so than your typical fantasy even. So I think in that way, it would be difficult for fantasy newbies to get into.
Yeah,
that was a lot.
I definitely agree. You know, I'm gonna try unplugging my headphones to see if I can get rid of this echo, because I lose track of what I'm saying because I hear myself talking. Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
There's still an echo.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, I was just on Book Battles last weekend, and there was an echo, and we solved it by somebody taking off their headphones. And that literally got rid of it.
I don't know.
And it wasn't even an echo for them.
Okay, I'll just have to focus on what I'm trying to say. But what I would say is that I don't think there's anything, like, there aren't concepts that are hard to grasp, like you were saying. But I think that the amount of characters and the amount of, like, different storylines and how they all interconnect with each other make it hard for a newbie to read, just because there's a lot of things you have to pay attention to, which you don't have to pay attention to every single thing. Like, you know, a lot of first-time readers don't pick up on stuff until you read it, because then it's, like, more obvious to you. So I don't know, like, you don't have to pick up on everything, but I think it's very easy for people to feel lost if they don't read much fantasy and aren't used to, like, trying to keep up with. Is my screen going in and out for you too?
No.
Oh, mine keeps like putting my face up and then taking it down and putting it up and taking it down. I think I'm so confused. But yeah, I think if people really want to read it as a newbie, they should feel free to try, because they'll get hooked and really like it and not confused. But I wouldn't be surprised if people were confused when they were trying to read it. Okay. I'm glad you guys know, even though I don't have headphones on. So I was worried that it would like play through.
Yeah, you sound a little bit like you're underwater, but I can totally still understand what you're saying. So
is it better with headphones?
Yeah, okay. Weirdly enough.
I'm gonna do that because they're no matter what. Okay. One of the things I wrote down was Rand losing the horn like multiple times. That was so annoying. Like, dude, just don't let it out of your sight. What is your problem? Oh. So someone suggested, like, on your end, Roya, do you have the volume up high? Like, maybe we're picking up, hearing me?
I do have the volume up somewhat high.
I don't know.
Do you think I should try with headphones?
Yeah, maybe if you have some handy.
I might.
Someone in the chat said they're having a hard time understanding. So are you guys in the chat hearing my echo too? Yes, they are. Why don't we try headphones on your end?
Okay.
Thank you for letting us know. People in the chat.
I'm gonna have to get up and find some. I know I have some somewhere. Oh, no, wait. Okay. Okay. Okay, let's see if this works.
Okay. Hello. I don't hear an echo. Yay! And I can hear you. Okay, I think we're good. Hi, kitty. Which one is that?
iPod. Yeah, Horatio's not allowed in here because he attacks her.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, it's really sad. I don't know why. I don't know how to get him to stop doing that because he didn't used to. When he was like 2 months old, he didn't used to. But then he started automatically. So I just keep a paper bag by the door so that if he does get past me into my room, he goes for the paper bag first so that I have more time to grab him.
That's funny. Okay, so yeah, Rand losing the horn multiple times was annoying. I was like, dude, just don't let it out of your sight. Like, don't leave it. But I'm glad that he kept getting it back. So what did you think about like the Days Daymar stuff, the game of houses?
The game of houses? I don't even remember that part.
Oh, really? Okay, so that's like when they're in, so they get to, I think it's Kyrian, and Rand keeps getting all these invitations to like go and be involved in like political stuff, and he ends up like, people think he's a really important lord because he keeps denying like all of these meetings.
Oh, yeah.
And people think it's because he has to be some like special lord, but really he like doesn't think he should be there anyways, and just like doesn't want to get involved in politics. But by trying not to get involved in politics, he gets really involved in it, which is like hilarious. Like, everything that Rand does to try and make people think he's not a lord only like reinforces their idea that he is a lord. So I think this stuff is interesting, and this plays out through like the rest of the series too. So it's called the Game of Houses, but in the old tongue, it's called Days Daymar. I'm probably not saying that right. I even looked it up before I started this, but I have forgotten. I keep my book here so that I can look up things. I'm gonna make sure I'm saying that right. And some of these things are just so hard to say anyways. Yeah, Days Daymar. Days Daymar. So it's called The Great Game, also known as the Game of Houses, name given to the scheming, plots, and manipulations for advantage by the noble houses. Great value is given to subtlety, to aiming at one thing while seeming to aim at another, and to achieving ends with the least visible effort. So Days Mar plays a big part throughout the whole series. Like any big city that you go to and there's politics, like it ends up coming up. And I remember when I first saw and read Game of Thrones, I was like, oh my gosh, that's a super similar idea. Which, I mean, the idea of like houses competing against each other for power is like not new in fantasy in general, but the idea that it's like named the Game of Houses and then Game of Thrones, it actually came out after this book, I thought was interesting. I mean, it's not like a super unique idea, but they're named very similarly and they're like very similar concepts.
Yeah, because I mean that is true. That I mean, a lot of fantasy does tend to have stuff like House Bloody Blah and House Bloody Blah and all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean that is a pretty interesting idea.
Yeah, I feel like most fantasy books there is politics going on, but they don't give that sort of like competition a name. Versus Wheel of Time does give a name, and so does Game of Thrones. So I thought that was interesting. And so today I wasn't sure when Game of Thrones came out, so I like looked it up. And it was the first book in the Game of Thrones series came out in 1996, and the second book in the series came out in 1990.
Yeah, so clearly there's an influence there.
Yeah, I think so. I also wrote down like the part where we got to visit the steading and we get to see a little more about Ogier culture. I really like Ogiers, and I thought that was an interesting part. Or what? Am I confused? Was that in this book? I thought it was.
Yeah, I think so. We do get a lot of Ogier culture in this book, and I like how there's the whole thing of, oh, when a girl likes a boy, she tells his mother, and then her mother tells his mother, and then the boy's entire like marriage is arranged before he even knows.
Yeah, and then there was I don't remember which of the three like main boys, but one of them was like, oh, that's so different from how we do it, but really it's not different from how they do it at all. It's like the same.
Well, it's all relative. It's like it's your perception and everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Someone said, I would love to see how they would portray the difference between the inner city and the colorful outer city on the small screen, because they are trying to make a TV. I mean, they've been trying to make this into a movie or TV show for like years and years, but I think there's been some recent movement within the last year. I think Sony has picked it up as a TV series. So there's been a lot of like talk about it being actually coming to fruition. I don't know. It makes me nervous. Obviously, Game of Thrones, they did an awesome job, but that was picked up by HBO. And I don't know. I don't have that much faith in Sony, I think is who picked it up. Whoever picked it up. I'm not sure that they'll be able to do a good job, but I know that Robert Jordan's wife, she's been pretty like involved in the process. And I think she's part of the reason why it hasn't happened yet is because she wants it to be done right. And so she's been careful about like what's actually been done, which at this point I don't think is much of anything.
Yeah, that is really interesting.
Yeah, I would definitely be interested in how this translates to the screen, especially in the post Game of Thrones era, because obviously there's some similarities in like that it's like a high fantasy with a huge world and lots of cities and things like that. But I don't know if this is a good way to describe it, but in my mind, the Game of Thrones world is a lot harsher and like has straight edges. That doesn't really make sense, but it's like more of a like sharp and harsher environment than the Wheel of Throne, the Wheel of Time books. They just have like a softer feel to me, and I don't know if that's partially because I started reading them when I was younger or what, but
no, I think it makes sense because I mean the kinds of themes that the Game of Thrones kind of has are like, because we even have main characters dying very brutally, and how you just like we just talked about Egwene getting knocked out
Yeah.
by what's his
When she
face,
could have
Pat
died.
Insane, and
Yeah.
everything, and she could easily have died. And my immediate thought was, in Game of Thrones, she would have died.
Yeah.
Who cares
Yeah.
if she's a main character? Like, you just don't know.
Someone said the Sword of Truth and Sword of Shannara series were not good TV series. I hope that the Wheel of Time does not get made into a show like that. That's exactly what I'm scared of. Is like if they don't have a big budget, like it could easily be a terrible TV show, and then nobody's gonna want to read the books. And that's not what I want to happen. I want it to be an awesome TV show, and everyone want to read the books, just like Game of Thrones happened.
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, I only saw like one, like 2 episodes of the Shannara TV show, but it seemed like it was done in this very dry way that doesn't really suck you in any sort of way.
Right.
And
well, I think
weird.
that, in my opinion, both of those series, Sword of Truth and Sword of Shannara, were aimed more at like teenagers. And so I feel like the shows aren't as serious as like the books could be, you know what I mean? So I'm really hoping that the Wheel of Time is more aimed for adult audiences, even though there's not as much like graphic things that happen in it, like the Game of Thrones series. But I just hope that it feels like an older feel to it than like the teenagery, like angsty sort of feel that I think the other 2 series have.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, what else? Oh, so we talked about this a little bit. Oh no, actually, I don't think we have talked about this. But when Egwene decides to trust Liandrin and like follow her into the ways, I mean, a lot of people on our discussion boards were saying that was like really dumb, and I totally agree. But I also think that Liandrin was like threatening them and saying that Rand was in trouble. And it totally makes sense to me that Egwene would drop everything to go save her like childhood friend if she thought she could actually make a difference. And she thought that Liandrin was working with Moraine. So I understand why she went. It was dumb. I would have wanted her to ask the Amarillan first, but I'm not sure if at this point Egwene knows that the Amarillan and Moraine are working together. I'm not sure. So maybe that's, I don't know. But you would think she would ask someone about it before just like running away.
Yeah, because the reason that I thought like, why the heck did they trust her was because she had come in like saying all this stuff about why are you guys like hanging out together? You're not like novices and accepted can't be friends. Meh, meh, meh. And she just seemed to be like throwing a fit over something like that shouldn't matter and kind of trivializing the fact that they're friends and everything. And so it seemed kind of weird that she would suddenly act like she's helping them when clearly they were like they were not really on friendly terms or anything. So it seemed kind of weird.
Yeah, definitely. We are almost out of time. The last couple of things that I have on my like list of things we could talk about was Ingtar's confession, which I already kind of mentioned, surprised me. Were you surprised by it? Yeah. I don't think there have been very many clues left like earlier in the book about that. I think that was meant to be like a super surprise. What about Matt blowing the horn? I was not expecting that. I was like, what?
No, me neither.
I mean, I wasn't expecting the horn to be blown for like a few more books. Like I figured that was like something that was going to happen later. Although I guess the title of the book should have given it away, The Great Hunt, but still, like I did not think that that was going to happen in this book, much less that it was going to be Matt who blew it.
Yeah, really.
There's one more thing that I put on my list that we could talk about, but I did some research on this, and I think technically it could be seen as a spoiler by some people. Like I think it's one of the things where there was like clues given and that some readers would make the connection, but some readers might not because it wasn't explicitly written. So I don't know, maybe we shouldn't talk about it. And we only have like 6 minutes left. Is there anything else that you want to talk about the book?
Not that I can really think of.
Okay. Right. Well, I mean, it's only almost been an hour. We could probably wrap up. I think I'm not going to talk about the last thing that I put on my list just because some people might think it's a spoiler. And I think we'll be able to talk about it next month, like in the next book for sure.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And I probably would want to talk about it for more than 6 minutes.
Okay, I can't wait to see what it is.
Okay, so we are going to call it a day. So thank you to everybody who joined us. And, we still have the discussion boards are going on the Goodreads group, but I've only gotten the first two, like half of the third book up. I need to get the other two up. It's on my to-do list for this weekend, so that should be up there soon. So someone in the chat wants to know if you have any predictions, Roya.
I haven't really thought about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've started started reading The Dragon Reborn at this point, but I mean, I haven't really thought about what I think is gonna happen in it.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone said if you haven't read on. So Roya has not. Well, she's started the third book, but this is her first time to read the series. So that's what I think is kind of fun about like these live shows that we do is because like I've read them before, at least most of them, and you haven't, so we can kind of like compare our different reactions and stuff. Oh, I mentioned this in my like announcement for this live show, but for anyone who is still here and listening, Tor is doing another like read through of the series. They have like a blog series that they're doing, and this time it's a lot of times they do like rereads, and those are really full of spoilers and stuff. But this is someone blogging about their very first experience reading the series. And I think she's doing like 10 chapters at a time for each blog post. And she also is like comparing it to other fantasy series and things that were published around the same time, which is kind of cool to see her like compare and contrast those. I think I've only read the first of that blog series, but if anybody's interested, check that out on tor.com. But yeah, I think that is it.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, guys. And we'll see you guys next month to talk about The Dragon Reborn. Bye.
Bye.